Brexit could be delayed if negotiations are still deadlocked by October, says Irish PM Leo Varadkar. Ireland's premier has raised the prospect of delaying Brexit to allow more time to negotiate the UK's exit deal. Leo Varadkar said extending the March 29 departure date was among the different scenarios being considered if there is no breakthrough in talks. Britain has said an EU summit in October is the target for having a deal in place on exit terms and future trade. But the negotiations have hit deadlock, with both sides seemingly unwilling to give ground over trade terms and the issue of how to keep a soft Irish border. The EU yesterday dismissed UK proposals for a backstop position to avoid a hard line between Northern Ireland and the Republic if there is no wider deal. Mr. Varadkar said while his government was making contingency plans for a hard Brexit, he insisted that preparatory work did not include for the provision of infrastructure on the 310-mile frontier with Northern Ireland. When the UK formally notified the EU in March 2017 of its intention to leave the Union, by triggering Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, a 2-year deadline for its exit was automatically set. Stressing that a no-deal scenario is still hypothetical, Mr. Varadkar told Irish broadcaster TV3, "You'll know that there are a number of different scenarios that could arise if we're in a no-deal situation. For example, it is possible to extend Article 50, to allow more time for negotiations to take place. There is the possibility of an interim deal, or a transition period, pending an outcome or final negotiations around the transition period. But one of our red lines, and this should be no surprise to anyone, is that we cannot countenance a hard border with physical infrastructure, with customs and checks, all of those things, between Northern Ireland and Ireland. That would be an abrogation of the Good Friday Agreement, a solemn agreement we made 20 years ago, and a legal agreement that is registered with the United Nations, signed by the United Kingdom government." Mr. Varadkar also raised the prospect of scheduling an extra EU Council summit at the end of this year if sufficient progress is not made by October's gathering. He said there could not be a deal at a crunch late-night meeting in Brussels because all EU nations had to sign off a package. Mr. Varadkar said former Irish PM Enda Kenny had suggested an extra meeting, perhaps in September or October, or even after that, in November. "I think that was a very helpful suggestion that will have to be considered," he added. "It's too soon to make a decision on that, but we'll have to consider it in the months ahead."